Thank you so much, Susan and Audrey, for making us laugh. The very first phone call I made to investigate the need for the Screen Time Action Network was to Dr. Victoria Dunkley. I told her that we were tired of trying to convince people that overuse of screens in childhood was a problem, but we noticed that there were people like her already making great headway with families to reduce children's screen time. And maybe they needed some support. I explained the idea that we would convene like-minded practitioners and educators and parents to collaborate. And before I could even complete the idea, she said, "Yes, this is incredible." Here I was talking to someone who'd been featured on Good Morning America, Psychology Today, and many other media outlets, and she was feeling alone in this work. Well, Victoria, here are all your new friends. Her book, Reset Your Child's Brain, a 4-week plan to end meltdowns, raise grades, and boost social skills by reversing the effects of electronic screen time, is a page-turner of text in our work. Dr. Dunkley is an integrative child psychiatrist who specializes in children with complex or treatment-resistant mental health conditions. She received a biology degree at the University of California, San Diego, pursued her medical training at Albany Medical College in New York, and returned to the West Coast for her psychiatric residency and child-adolescent fellowships at UC Irvine's Neuropsychiatric Center. You may have seen her greatest achievement this weekend, 8-month-old Max. Please welcome Dr. Victoria Dunkley.
Thank you, Jean. Okay. So just to give you a little bit of background about how I got interested in this, when I first finished my training in the early 2000s, I was working with kids who had experienced trauma, kids who were in foster care, group homes, residential treatment centers. And they'd all been neglected and abused. And so they all were prone to being in this state of hyperarousal or the state of stress all the time. So they had kind of a hair trigger response and would go into fight or flight very easily. So I noticed with those kids, if they played video games even a little bit, they would start, becoming very reactive, throw chairs, hit each other, especially in the residential setting. And we could, in that setting though, we could actually control what they were doing. So, I suggested that we just get rid of the video games because they're causing so many problems, and lo and behold, all the incident reports fell by a third within a month. So that was my first experience. Then I started kind of implementing no video games with kids in my private practice, and then I realized whether they had ADHD or anxiety or bipolar disorder or depression, that it kind of helped across the board. So I started to formulate this idea that it was really just overstimulating their nervous system, irritating them, and that they couldn't calm down and relax or sleep. And then about 5 years ago, I got additional training or board certification in integrative medicine. And integrative medicine looks at lifestyle factors to optimize treatment as well as to minimize the need for any medication. And so I learned about micronutrients and hormones and diet and exercise benefits. But despite having all these new tools, I still realized that addressing screen time far and away was the best tool I had. So I always start with addressing screen time, and I always return to it when things aren't going well. So I'm just going to quickly go over some of the trends and risks, because I'm sure you guys know most of that stuff already. The physiological impacts and the mental health concerns, and the benefits of restricting or doing electronic fast, and then some recommendations. So currently there's a huge increase in psychiatric disorders in children. We are seeing a big increase with depression, even suicide, as well as things like tics, ADHD, and a huge increase in bipolar disorder. Alongside that, we're seeing a huge increase with psychotropic medication prescribing, particularly the stimulants, which are used for ADHD, as well as the antipsychotics, which are really heavy-duty drugs that are used for everything from mood problems to aggression to autism to tics. So they're really effective, but they have a lot of side effects. They cause massive weight gain, high cholesterol, movement disorders, across the board. So it's really a public health issue that these are being overprescribed. We're seeing a lot of medical conditions that we never used to see in kids. Obesity, but also high cholesterol, hypertension, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, as well as musculoskeletal disorders. There's a huge increase in disability filings for neurological and mental health issues. It used to be disability was really meant for physical disabilities, and now it's predominantly mental health. And then there's an increase in the gender achievement gap. So both boys and girls, their reading ability is falling off the curve, but boys are falling twice as fast. So meanwhile, as we all know, everyone here knows this, that kids are using screens more and more. Grade school kids are averaging about 5 hours a day, and teens about 9. And then we're also seeing kids use them at younger ages, including infants. And then screens in school now, hours, kids are getting hours in school as well. So if we know that there's all these disturbing trends going on, as well as this increase in screen time, the question is there a link? And yes, we already know that there's a link between screen time and all these disorders. So then the question becomes why? If we already know that there's a link, why isn't the public more aware? Why aren't doctors more aware? Why aren't teachers more aware? And that's because of all these misconceptions that are perpetuated in our society for financial and political gains. So the first is about content. So there's this belief that as long as the content's educational, that it's okay, it's not going to cause any harm. But in fact, total screen time is much more indicative of problems. So it's really the medium, not the message. The next myth is that computer time is much better for them than TV. And I noticed in my own practice that when kids were using interactive screen time, that their symptoms were way worse. And then it turns out that there's actually some research showing that just 30 minutes of computer time at bedtime would disrupt mood and focus and sleep the next day, whereas I think it was 2 hours of TV would affect some of the sleep but not completely disrupt it, and their memory and cognition wouldn't be unimpaired the next day compared to computer use. And then there's other research showing that interactive screen time is much more highly associated with mood problems, focus, and social issues, and sleep issues. The next myth is everything in moderation. This one drives me crazy. First of all, no kid does it in moderation, but some kids really can't handle any screen time at all, like kids on the autism spectrum, kids who have attachment disorder, kids who are psychotic, they really just can't tolerate any. So that is overused. Skip that one. The next myth is that computer skills need to be taught early so that kids are ready for today's world. Computer skills are really overemphasized in school, and they're relatively easy to learn at any age. So at one of the talks I gave, the IT guy was 12 years old. Tracy was there, she's here somewhere. But on the other hand, my social media assistant is my own mom. She's in her 70s, and she didn't even know what Twitter was, and she totally is, she was able to learn it. We've already heard a lot about ed tech, but some of the research shows that devices in the classroom actually impair performance, that schools with the most computer use actually have the lowest scores, and then kids that have less than 30 minutes of screen time a day have the highest GPA. So that was from the learning study, the learning habit study. And that study also showed that kids that have chores also have higher GPAs. Also, there's all this new software that's supposed to revolutionize learning for kids that have learning disabilities, such as reading, But in fact, reading from a screen actually hinders literacy development as well as comprehension, so it just simply doesn't make sense. Then there's another myth that devices in the classroom help students be more efficient. They can take notes faster, they can do that, but we actually know that handwriting notes beats laptop taking in terms of recall, integrating the material, as well as test performance. And we also know from numerous studies that laptops distract other students, even when they're being used appropriately, and as we know, most of the time they're not being used appropriately. So just the nature of technology itself is really at odds with kids' developmental needs. So screens actually, they cause a lot of different physiological effects, but one way to look at it is just that they act very much like a stimulant. So it irritates the nervous system. So screen time desynchronizes the body clock, it alters brain chemistry and raises stress hormones, and it creates a mismatch. So it creates this fight or flight response without discharging energy. So fight or flight is really meant for when we were being chased by the tiger or we were being attacked by a predator. It's a way to get this huge increase of energy and then it needs to be discharged. So when it's not discharged, it turns into either anxiety or aggression or depression or some kind of physical ailment. And then overall, screen time just kind of creates drag on development. So, we see kids that are really immature. There's research showing that kids are performing about 3 years behind where they were 30 years ago, cognitively. And it just makes their development more chaotic. So there's actually numerous different mechanisms that cause this fight or flight or hyperarousal response. The first is that the reward pathways get activated in the brain pretty intensely, and that releases dopamine, and we know that with screen time, the dopamine pathways can actually become worn out and then desensitized and they just don't work as well. That's why kids want more and more stimulation, and they feel they can't focus unless it's something on the screen. And there's a lot of intense sensory input, so the colors are very vivid, the movement's very fast, there's different scenes changing all very quickly, it just overwhelms the sensory system. Then there's the bright light. A lot of people, it's kind of nice now, parents kind of know about this phenomenon now, that the bright light suppresses melatonin, which is the sleep signal. So the light from the screen has a lot of blue and white tones, which mimics the sky and tells the brain it's daytime, it's time to be alert. But what happens is not only does that suppress melatonin, it desynchronizes the clock. And then once the clock is desynchronized, we have clock cells throughout every cell in the body. So everything kind of gets out of whack, your hormones go out of whack. Your body temperature is supposed to drop at night. It doesn't drop like it's supposed to when there's light at night. And it also affects serotonin, and serotonin is important for mood and sense of well-being. And we know that serotonin is low in states of depression and suicide and aggression. Multitasking also really increases stress levels and impairs performance, as well as drains mental reserves. And then the interactivity itself, so that also raises arousal. That's why advertisers like to make things interactive. And then radiation from all these devices. So Wi-Fi, cell phone, signal radiation, frequencies. There's research showing that also increases the fight or flight response. And there's also some research suggesting it might suppress melatonin and causes inflammation. So probably the radiation kind of acts synergistically alongside all these other effects. So we get this overstimulation and stress reactions. When the brain is under stress, especially chronic stress, the blood flow actually starts to shift from the front part of the brain to the more primitive, deeper parts of the brain. And then so it kind of short circuits the frontal lobe, basically. And if we look at what the frontal lobe does, the frontal lobe controls everything that makes us human. So the frontal lobe controls emotional regulation, executive functioning, so things like focus, planning, organizing, as well as things like impulse control and creativity, empathy. So you can see if the frontal lobe is kind of shut down, any or all of these things can become affected. So I coined the term electronic screen syndrome because I was seeing so many kids that were misdiagnosed and being put on medication unnecessarily. So I wanted to kind of conceptualize it so that, there would be a way to kind of characterize all these things that this constellation of symptoms we were seeing, and it helped parents to kind of wrap their minds around what was going on. So electronic screen syndrome can look at a lot of different ways, but a typical way is that the child will their mood will be very dysregulated, so they'll be very irritable, tearful, they might go into rages, everything stresses them out. The parents often say, we're walking around on eggshells around this kid. Cognitively, they're very forgetful, they can't focus, they can't get their homework done, or if they do get it done, it's good to turn it in, they can't find anything. And then behavior-wise, they tend to be very defiant, reactive, and socially, sometimes their social skills are really impaired too, so they might have poor eye contact, have trouble making conversation, that kind of thing. And then they have low empathy. So as we know, adults, and parents, all of us are guilty of using screens too much as well, and as other people have mentioned. It's not just that parents model behavior, it's also that the kids are really feeling ignored and rejected. And it's really making kids feel lonely. And we know loneliness is in turn a risk factor for tech addiction. So basically, overstimulation or too much screen time can mimic or exacerbate virtually any psychiatric disorder. So I talked about the mood and the cognitive and behavioral things, but also anxiety. So kids can have panic attacks. I've seen really severe cases of OCD that go away when screens are removed. The kid can look like they have post-traumatic stress disorder. Neurologically, tics are really on the rise. It's pretty common now. Those get worse. Sensory integration issues, headaches, and autism. So with autism, you really see symptoms get significantly worse and much better when screens are removed. So also I wanted to name electronic screen syndrome to differentiate a little bit from tech addiction. It's kind of on a spectrum. So some kids aren't necessarily addicted, but they still have a lot of symptoms. But all kids who are addicted also have electronic screen syndrome. So some of the imaging studies have shown that there's gray matter atrophy in various parts of the frontal lobe. The cortex, which is the outermost layer of the brain, is actually thinner. There's white matter fragmentation, and white matter is what kind of connects the different parts of the brain to itself and also the brain to the body. And then there's dopamine dysfunction, so there's reduced receptors. And then there's abnormal processing. And another interesting point was that they thought that the damage was going to look closer to like behavioral addictions like gambling, but it really looks more similar to drug and alcohol damage. So that was surprising because they thought, well, they're not really ingesting anything, so how is it really causing that kind of damage? But if you think about, the eyes are actually part of the central nervous system. So the eyes are actually the only part of the central nervous system that are exposed to the outside world. So it's, definitely the eyes can influence the brain. And there's visual and non-visual traps, so even when the eyes are closed. Okay, so what's the solution? So what I do is when I see these kids that are, revved up in this state of hyperarousal, the first thing I do is electronic fast, which means they get, all devices, all interactive screen devices are taken away for 3 to 4 weeks minimum, sometimes longer. And this helps reset the nervous system. So what it does is it kind of resets everything I was talking about earlier that kind of goes out of whack. So the body clock gets resynchronized once the brain is allowed to get deep rest. Dopamine can rebalance, the stress hormones lower, and the brain returns to the frontal lobe. So when that happens, you see this dramatic improvement in mood, cognition, sleep, and behavior. And I mean, it is dramatic. Like Melanie was saying, like parents say, it's like a miracle. Well, it kind of is. It's really cool. You can see kids start reading. They're happier. They're calmer. They're interacting more. So at the same time, it clarifies diagnosis and it optimizes any other treatments they're getting. It's not to say that it's going to take away everything, but it allows whatever's left, it's a lot more workable. And also at the same time, it provides a baseline. So if the return to their natural baseline, so then you can see if the parents really want to reintroduce, some screen time in much more reduced amounts. Now they have a baseline to go from to see if the child is becoming dysregulated again. Okay, I'm going to skip this. Okay, so I had a video of the Good Morning America family that we worked with. All right, that's too bad. Okay, so I'll just tell you about the family. So it was basically two kids. There was a 5-year-old little girl named Taylor, and she had kind of severe ADHD kind of symptoms, although she wasn't diagnosed with that. Very hyperactive. Her attention span was about 5 seconds. As I said, she had already had to repeat preschool. She was in danger of getting kicked off her gymnastics, out of her gymnastics class. And I think she was struggling socially as well. Her brother was getting good grades. He was 8 years old. Her brother was getting good grades, but he also had some trouble focusing. He was having some anxiety and stomach aches. So we worked with this family for about 6 months, and we started out with just educating them on some of the things that we've gone over here. And then I talked to them about doing the electronic fast. It took a while for them to get on board, and the mom got on board, and the dad was still kind of hesitant. But eventually he didn't really buy into it, but he agreed to do it. So they did it for 4 weeks, and lo and behold, they saw some dramatic changes. The little girl went from being able to pay attention for about 5 seconds to more like 20 minutes, or sometimes up to an hour. And I played with this when I first went to the house. I played with this little girl, and she was like one of the most severe cases I've ever seen. Like she just, get out a doll, another doll, another doll. I sat down to play Shoes and Ladders or something with the brother, and I asked her to sit down with us, and she couldn't even sit down to play. She just couldn't stop moving. It was just, it was pretty significant. So after that, and I really wish we had the video, but anyway, she was able to play. They started playing with each other, and that was another thing the brother had reported to us that. Okay.
Now, with a growing problem for parents in this digital age about something a psychiatrist calls electronic screen syndrome. It describes children who are obsessed with their devices. 2020 anchor Elizabeth Vargas, always great to have her here, and she has one family story. Elizabeth?
Hey, good morning, Robin. Absolutely. We all know about this, those of us who are parents and have kids who are dealing with this. According to one study, teens spend an average of nearly 7 hours every day on electronic devices. Younger kids, tweens, nearly 5 hours a day. Autumn and Chad say their 2 children's fascination with screen time got so out of control, they decided to put those kids on an extreme digital diet, banning all electronics for 4 weeks.
What do you think they're doing?
You are watching a covert mission in progress.
Sneaking what?
5-year-old Taylor and her brother, 8-year-old Jackson, are desperate to play on their devices.
Guys, I told you, only 10 minutes of device time.
Their mother, Autumn, says the kids' use of electronics is out of control.
I never get tired of my device.
No, you can wait to check on your YouTube. The first thing out of their mouth is, hey mom, I want to get on device. What do I have to do? Do I have to read? Do I have to do this? Just definitely frustrated.
There are meltdowns at home and on the go.
So here's Jackson throwing a fit because he can't play with the game.
Autumn says she's had enough.
We've got to find some kind of control in here.
ABC News connects the family with child psychiatrist Dr. Victoria Dunkley, author of the book Reset Your Child's Brain. She coined a name for kids' obsession with devices, electronic screen syndrome.
The child goes into a state of hyperarousal and the brain just starts to malfunction. So you see problems with focus, behavior, and mood.
Jackson, it's difficult for him to focus. I would say my daughter, she has more behavioral issues.
Dr. Dunkley convinces the family to do a 4-week electronic fast.
And then we can see, do they really still have attention symptoms? Are they really still misbehaving as much? So what we're going to do is actually have no devices for 4 weeks. And we're going to see what happens.
Mom locks the devices in storage. And as the days go by, the kids start to try some new things.
When the kids come home and they just go outside, which isn't something they've done before.
And they join a class.
Well, me and Taylor, we both joined Jiu-Jitsu.
At the end of the 4-week fast, everyone is spending more time together as a family.
I like to play with my sister even more than I did before.
Jackson is spending more time reading. Dr. Dunkley finds that Taylor's meltdowns decreased and her attention span increased dramatically.
It's easy to see when kids are too attached to their technology, but what's not so obvious is all these other problems that can be related in terms of their mood, behavior, and focus.
As for the future of those devices,
There is a time and place for it, so we're trying to find that balance.
I think we all have to be really careful that we realize that social media does not replace the social experience.
now Autumn and Chad say they're going to keep this electronic fast going as long as they can. They did the 4-week fast. It's been 3 weeks since the end of the fast, and the kids have only asked for their devices 2 times, Robin. And when they do introduce electronics, they plan to go slow. I mean, just a little bit at a time, really limiting the amount of time they use.
How long did it take for them to settle down once those were taken from them?
Taking them away, it was about 2 weeks of rough going, yeah.
Okay, so, I'm glad you guys got to see that. Okay, so it really only took a few days for them to adjust to being off the devices. It took a couple of weeks for them to see, changes in their focus and stuff like that. But that was a really good example because the family, these weren't patients of mine, they were just, picked by the TV show. And they didn't really have any formal diagnoses. And I was stressed out the whole time because I knew this was going to be on TV, and if it didn't work, I was going to... And then they wanted to reintroduce, after the fast was over, initially both parents wanted to reintroduce. I knew from doing this so many times that if they reintroduced, it was going to be all over. Within 2 weeks, they'd be back to square one. But then the mom just, she was a social media consultant herself, so she completely just did a 180. She was like, I'm going to have to find a new career. But she really noticed that when the kids came home from school, when she asked them how they were doing, she was listening to what their answer was instead of just asking them, as a rote thing. So, and she also noticed with her husband, when same thing, when he came home, she asked him how his day went, she would listen to the answer, and they just had longer conversations. And before she was like, every time she could have a picnic with the kids, she'd be taking pictures and posting on social media. And so she stopped doing all of that and just, really had a come to Jesus moment. And they were so unplugged that they didn't even watch the segment when it. And then months later, I just texted her again and just said, "How's it going?" And she said, "We're still on no devices." So it was like, wow, it was awesome. So it just goes to show you, and of course, they still had some exposure at school, and I was nervous about that too, because especially the boy had quite a bit of screen time at school. They were on an iPad program. So I was nervous about that. I wanted to write, a note saying, get him off, at least during the fast while he was at school, but the mom didn't want to do that. But it still worked. So it was a good example of kind of a real world family that had success with this. Okay, this is some other, a couple other families that, these are just people that actually just read the book and then did it on their own. So that's another take-home point I really want to impress, is that people can do this on their own. Even if I have a a 4-day email course on my website, and people do it just from that too. So this is just, I know you guys probably can't read it, maybe you can, but just a teacher was saying that her son's focus was improved, he was showing good manners. The other teacher said he had a huge increase in his reading scores, and he progressed almost a year within a few months. And I think he was only 6 weeks into the class at this point. This is another mother that sent me a message. This kid was addicted to Minecraft, and was so addicted that he would make the family act out scenes when he was playing. And they got rid of everything, including the laptops and desktops in the house. He was 6 years old. So this kid went, from being severely addicted to allowing his mom to put him on her lap and read to him, and then he started reading on his own as well. He had special ed services, and those actually were cut down. He was on melatonin to sleep, and he was also on Abilify for his extreme behaviors, and he was able to get off that too. So just some overall recommendations. You've heard these all before, but no screens in the bedroom. Homework should be done in a common area where the parent can see. And they should do any screen-related homework first, so there's less screen light at night. Use a device basket so that everybody puts all their devices in when they walk the door. And the parents should have screen rules too. Obviously, they can be different. Ideally, they wouldn't have any screen time while the kids are at home. But if they have to, then they should, if they can try to designate, from 5 to 6, I might be using my device, but after that, I'll be screen-free too. And kids should be able to call out the parent. We have them pay a tax or something. And kids, So these are all the evidence-based practices that actually protect the brain, not just protect the brain, but actually make it more resilient and bigger. So eye contact. It's my little baby's eyes right there. Face-to-face time. So we know from research that face-to-face conversation with adults is one of the most important indicators for reading, writing, and speaking. Loving touch. Chris was talking about this too. Kids just aren't touched as much, because parents are on their devices as well. And they're not touching each other, they're not playing. Physical play, exercise, movement. Reading also is a really important predictor for success. And that is really, like I was saying earlier, when you see, especially boys, when you see boys start reading books, it's so cool. And mindfulness. So mindfulness actually makes the cortex thicker. Like I was saying, with tech addiction, we see the cortex become thinner. Mindfulness, meditation, yoga, that kind of stuff actually grows the brain. And nature, green spaces, and art, and music. So the other thing that is protective is really thinking about the body clock. So avoiding screens after sundown, bright light in the morning. So the body clock has to be synchronized, and it also can be strengthened. So you want to have like a nice sine wave like this, like you're alert and active during the day, and then you sit down and you're in deep sleep at night. And these days most people's body clock, that nice sine wave is actually flattened. So bright light in the morning, as well as rigorous activity in the morning. First thing in the morning, like right when you wake up, that's actually the best. This is what like the NFL teams do this. That they're traveling a lot and they get jet lag, but they have to be go, go, go. So this is some of the things they do. Another thing that's helpful is to put filtering software. I have this on every device, my laptop, phone. And it warms and darkens the screen, it makes it more red, blocks the blue light as the day goes on. So it can still suppress melatonin, but the amount it suppresses is about cut in half. I always recommend that parents put incandescent bulbs in the kids' rooms, as well as if you want, you can put a red bulb in there. That helps too. It helps if they're really having trouble sleeping. So energy efficient lighting is really stimulating. Okay, so some of the recommendations, we want to pace technology exposure, not because we're thinking that this is what the kids need, but we want to pace it according to their developmental needs as well as individual needs. So some kids, like I said, really just can't tolerate any. They might be able to when they're older, when their brain is more integrated. And then, the irony is that we really need, the frontal lobe is what controls self-discipline, whether it's screens or money or eating. So if you protect the frontal lobe and you protect the kids from exposure to screens until they're much older, they're going to have a much better chance of being able to manage it in a healthy way. And just recommending that kids be allowed to do the fast if they need to in schools. A lot of times I do write a doctor's note if I'm describing fast and they have a lot of screen time at school, just at least for those 4 weeks. And sometimes the schools, it depends on the school, but sometimes if it's just for 4 weeks and we're just kind of doing it as an experiment, they'll do it. And then if it works, then they're more likely to make more permanent accommodations for that kid. Sometimes we also just ask for no homework at all, so they can play after school. And sometimes I ask for no screen-related homework so they don't have anything, especially if they're depressed. So in case you can't read, says it keeps me from looking at my phone every 2 seconds. So the message here is really that we know from behavioral research that we humans aren't very good at being disciplined about our habits, so about changing habits, I should say. So it's much more effective to actually change your environment than to try to rely on your own willpower. So that means getting devices out of the house. If you saw that video, the mom actually took the devices to storage and locked them up, and that is what I don't recommend hiding them in a closet because the kids will find them, and if they know they're there, then they keep thinking, it's just in that closet. So really getting the devices out of the house, and then having parents being vigilant about new devices coming into the house. Paula mentioned, getting iPads as gifts. That's one of my drives me crazy. Is that the parent gets an iPhone and they get a free one and they hand it to their kid, or they get their new phone and they hand the old one to the kid, or for Christmas, an aunt gives an iPad as a gift, and then they're afraid to get rid of that device because it was a gift. So we really just have to emphasize this is what the brain needs. So that's it, I think. Thanks for paying attention, and sorry about the